Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive, frankly intense debate that is shaking up the economic world right now. We're looking at the mathematical and ideological clash surrounding wealth concentration. On one side, we have former trader Gary Stevenson and his stark mathematical models warning of an inevitable wealth drain. And on the flip side, we have fierce free market counterarguments highlighting the undeniable power of innovation, capital mobility, and the natural life cycles of wealth. Let's unpack the numbers and the philosophies driving both of these perspectives.
To unpack this, we'll quickly walk through the core wealth inequality debate, break down the math of passive income versus outflows, explore the middle-class squeeze, look at the clash between trillionaires and the middle class, and wrap up with the three fiscal choices.
All right, Section 1, the wealth inequality debate. So to really grasp this debate, we have to pin down exactly what a wealth tax is. Most of us are completely used to being taxed on the paycheck we bring home every month. But Gary Stevenson, whose models we're looking at today, isn't talking about taking a bigger bite out of your daily income. Not at all. A wealth tax specifically targets the total stock of accumulated real assets. We're talking real estate, stocks, land. It targets the hoard of wealth just sitting there, not the paycheck you're earning today.
And Stevenson uses some incredibly vivid imagery here. He argues that without stepping in, the sheer mathematics of ultra-wealth will act like an unstoppable force. He literally calls centibillionaires and trillionaires a Mongol horde on the horizon. And he's saying that, based on basic math, they will eventually extract all assets from everyday people. He's not framing this as some moral failing of the rich, but as a completely inevitable mathematical outcome of how our system works.
But hold on, because critics fiercely push back on this. Take figures like Elon Musk, as paraphrased by Piers Morgan in our sources. They counter this purely mathematical model by pointing to the massive tangible value being created. They ask, look, if someone is bringing green energy to millions of people or revolutionizing space travel, why do you want to punish their success? From this free market perspective, pushing for a wealth tax is often labeled the politics of envy, because they argue it completely ignores the immense innovation, job creation, and progress driven by these top entrepreneurs.
Moving in to Section 2, passive income versus outflows.
It all really boils down to one staggering number, 12 to 15%. According to Stevenson's models and his direct interviews with billionaires, the ultra-wealthy are often seeing passive returns of around 12 to 15% on their assets. Meanwhile, the broader economy, the one most of us are actually living in, is only growing at a sluggish 1 to 2% a year. This math creates a massive, accelerating divergence that fundamentally changes who owns what.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real friction here. On one side, the ultra-rich are generating accelerating passive income. They are the ones receiving the rents, the stock dividends, the interest on debt. But on the flip side, the working and middle classes are burdened by compounding passive outflows. They're the ones paying that rent, paying the mortgage interest, and paying the taxes to service national debt. So it becomes this structural loop where wealth is just constantly flowing in one single direction.
To really put the scale of this into perspective, let's do the math on a trillionaire. A 12% return on a single $1 trillion, that equals $120 billion of untaxed passive income every single year. That is a truly mind-boggling amount of capital that requires absolutely no new work, and it fuels this endless cycle where the ultra-wealthy just use that massive recurring cash flow to buy up even more available assets in the real world.
Which brings us to Section 3, the middle-class squeeze.
Stevenson points out a super crucial reality here. Wealth isn't just a magical number floating in the sky or some digits on a banking app. It's real things. Wealth is the physical infrastructure of a country. We're talking housing, land, factories, energy grids. It also includes debt, like owning other people's mortgages and government bonds. And the key point is this: because the ultra-rich are using their massive passive income to buy up these real physical assets, regular families are simply getting priced out of ownership. It is exactly why the dream of buying a first home can feel mathematically impossible for so many people right now.
And you can see this dramatic shift starkly visible in the macroeconomic data. Stevenson highlights that decades ago, the UK government's wealth was at a surplus of plus 100% of GDP. But today, that has completely collapsed to a deficit of negative 100%. Now, that wealth didn't just magically vanish into thin air, it simply transferred from public and middle-class hands straight into the private portfolios of the ultra-wealthy.
We're seeing a very similar, frankly explosive trend on a global scale too. According to data from economist Gabriel Zucman, cited in our sources, the billionaire class's share of total world GDP was just 3% back in 1987. Today, it has exploded to 17%.
So yes, the global economic pie is growing, but the slice owned by the very top is expanding exponentially faster, draining resources from the bottom and the middle.
All right, Section 4, Trillionaires versus the Middle Class.
Stevenson concludes all this math with one incredibly blunt statement. He says, you simply cannot simultaneously have an untaxed trillionaire class and an asset-owning middle class. In an economy growing at 1 or 2%, if untaxed fortunes are growing at 12 to 15%, the math strictly dictates that eventually the top tier is going to own absolutely everything, and that leaves the middle class as permanent renters in a world they used to actually have a stake in.
But we absolutely have to look at the other side of the coin here. Free market texts like The Sovereign Individual offer a powerful counter-narrative to Stevenson's math. They argue that wealth naturally dissipates over generations because it gets distributed among descendants, meaning the rich aren't some static, unchanging class forever lording over everyone else. Plus, free markets naturally disrupt monopolies of wealth through competition and fresh innovation. And arguably their biggest point is that large governments are notoriously inefficient, often wasting resources on a massive scale compared to the hyper-efficient way private investors and talented entrepreneurs deploy capital.
This leads us to our final part, Section 5, the 3 fiscal choices. Stevenson warns that as government debt completely maxes out trying to patch these wealth transfers, nations are basically going to face only 3 really difficult choices moving forward. Choice 1, significantly increase taxation on the very rich. Choice 2, significantly increase taxation on working and middle-class people. Or, Choice 3, dismantle the welfare state entirely. And his argument is that if we don't choose option 1, the burden is inevitably going to crush the middle class or the most vulnerable members of society.
But again, critics fiercely pushed back against that first option, pointing straight to history and modern reality. They note that, historically, when tax rates hit 90% or higher, it just drove wealth creators completely out of the country. And today, in the information age, capital is highly mobile. Texts like The Sovereign Individual predict that wealthy citizens will start acting more like customers of governments. They'll just swiftly move their highly portable, liquid assets to low-tax jurisdictions. From this perspective, punitive wealth taxes just destroy economic incentive and ultimately impoverish the exact nations trying to implement them.
Now, to counter this very real threat of capital flight, economists like Gabriel Zuckman have proposed a specific countermeasure, an exit tax. The whole idea here is to implement strict taxes, ensuring that billionaires and centibillionaires pay their societal share before they are legally allowed to move their wealth offshore. It's basically a physical lock on digital wealth, making sure the bill gets paid before the capital can just take flight.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we're really left at a profound crossroads. If the math of compounding inequality is as inevitable as Stevenson claims, are we prepared to implement strict, totally unprecedented wealth and exit taxes? Or will the sheer mobility of modern wealth, just like the free market advocates predict, force the middle class to ultimately absorb the cost of our economic future? It is a question that goes way beyond just numbers on a page. It's about the very structure of the society we want to live in moving forward. What do you think?